Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the weekly MMA Cycles Market Update. Today is the 3rd of July, 2024. I am Gianni DePoci, your host, and I'm joined this week by a very special guest, Derek Panaia. Derek recently hosted an options webinar with Ray Merriman over here at MMA Cycles. Derek, how you doing? It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Gianni. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
we had a really good webinar on Sunday. It'd be fun to kind of go over some of the things that we talked about on Sunday, and some of those trades have actually done pretty well already. They're 3 days into it.
Yeah, very good. Well, we definitely want to talk about the analysis behind the setup of those trades. But before we do, I do want to discuss one of the reasons why we had that webinar on Sunday. Really important geocosmic critical reversal date period that we're in right now. The CRD zone started off with Saturn going retrograde on Saturday, June 29th. And just yesterday, we had Neptune going retrograde on July 2nd, and the same day Venus formed a trine to Saturn. And so we're in this reversal period. Saturn and Neptune, very important when it comes to markets. Neptune, in fact, one of the most powerful signatures with respect to reversals in our methodology. But Saturn rules reality, Neptune perception. We know that those two things are very important when it comes to markets. So let's jump right into it. I'm actually going to start off by looking at the Dow. We have the market closed early here today on Wednesday. We're shut tomorrow in the United States for Independence Day, and then we have a regular day on Friday. So markets closed. The Dow is still consolidating near its all-time highs. From my vantage point, Derek, it's new all-time highs or bust. I still like to see the NASDAQ outperforming. That's a good sign. But what's your take on what's going on in the stock market? And do you think we're close to a high, or do you think we can continue rallying into the summer?
Yeah, the stock market's in an interesting position. There's a bearish divergence larger that's overlooming with the Dow not making new highs. The NASDAQ and S&P have kind of made their new highs. And, the formation on the Dow, is a triangle formation, which, as you know, can be a continuation pattern.
Yeah.
Not always, but I would say most of the time it's a continuation pattern. So like you just said, if the Dow doesn't confirm this, I think right now I would be looking for opportunities to maybe put shorts in this market. Albeit, this is a trade against the trend, which we like to do here at MMA. We like to pick tops and bottoms here. The downside could be worth the risk reward. We're getting late in a few of the longer cycles, which have historically shown that these sell-offs can be 16 to 26% conservatively. That's a pretty big number. In the meantime, I know there's still a possibility of a blow off top. The markets tend to like to top out that way. So, until the Dow though confirms it, I'm cautiously bearish here.
Well, it's interesting. I talk about individual stocks a little bit in these weekly YouTube videos. We don't analyze them on a periodic basis in any of our reports, but just so far this week, the big moving stock that we've seen is Tesla. Big breakout from a multi-month base there, and we're seeing kind of this was the only stock of the quote unquote Magnificent Seven that hasn't really participated. But I find this breakout very interesting. Since Jupiter is in the sign of Gemini, Gemini rules automobiles. Obviously, Uranus is, kind of running out the clock on its time in Taurus, set to move into Gemini next year. Could be a boon for automobiles, electrical vehicles, and Tesla, I think, is starting to move. And that's a pretty good sign because out of the other Magnificent Seven stocks, it's kind of lagged. And I'm also watching Meta. Due to it being a social media company. Again, Gemini kind of covers that, that sector. And with Jupiter being in the sign of Gemini, I think it could, lead to a breakout higher even in Meta. So do you have any thoughts or comments on any of the Magnificent Seven stocks or just the ones that I just covered? Do you follow them at all?
I don't trade a lot of stocks. I'm really ingrained as a commodity trader. But just going back to Tesla, I did see some news come through on BYD too out of China, which had some really, really, good sales numbers to report. And maybe that whole sector is worth looking at. I mean, that's a nice move in Tesla. And quickly looking at that chart, it looks like a loose, inverted head and shoulders
Yeah.
there. That could, give this a little more upside.
Let's
Tesla's a proud favorite.
Yeah. Let's jump over to the interest rate market. Take a look at the 10-year Treasury yield. We saw yields drop notably today. I think we're in the time band for a half primary cycle low. Interest rate markets have been pretty tricky to read this year with some of the ambiguities in the long-term cycle. So any additional insights that you could add to what's happening in bonds or interest rates, perhaps into year end?
I saw some interesting activity in, notes in the last few trading sessions, which leaded me to believe that short term we were going to get a little pop up in notes, which we kind of saw today. And that kind of spilled over obviously into the metals too. But like you said, I mean, these markets have been bouncing back and forth. Every time they look like they're ready to head higher or lower with some type of, trend following movement, they just turn again.
Yeah.
The market's very confused right now versus, the reality of inflation versus the perception of what's going to happen in the future with inflation. And, I have changed our strategies shorter term on the notes, just to take profits very quickly. I've had a couple winning trades
Yeah.
and been very, very quick and short profits.
Great. Let's jump over to the currencies real quick before we get into your gold and metals analysis. So big bid here in the euro today, one of the biggest rallies we've seen this year in the euro. I think, Derek, that this is just a corrective rally. We are going to have a trine in the sun and Saturn next week on the 10th. But I think that the trend in the euro is still down. I'd be looking for a major cycle top to happen in the euro here shortly. So what's your take on the dollar, currencies, anything else that you're watching in the Forex space?
Yeah, the dollar is, just it's hard to bet against it. Every time I think the dollar is about to start a downtrend, it picks itself back up again and heads higher. And, I think until there's more convincing data that, the dollar is topped out or it's going to head lower, you've got to just stay with the trend, which is up in the dollar.
Indeed. I just realized I know you track the energy market, crude oil. Let me actually pull up USO because we don't have the closing price from today. A little bit of a kind of a quiet day on the energy front, but anything that you're watching in crude oil here, obviously Neptune just went retrograde. Neptune's the co-ruler of the energy market with Jupiter. So do you have a bullish or bearish bias on energy, and what do you see here over the next couple of months?
Crude oil had a nice trade. We got long crude oil on that breakdown a few weeks back. But when it got back over 80, and kind of stalled out there, we moved back to the sidelines. This latest pop over that is very interesting. It's certainly, turning the trends higher on multiple timeframes. Right now, I know the talk is probably that pop was due to the hurricane entering the Gulf of Mexico. But I think it's a market that's got to be paid attention to going forward. Longer term, I do like this market. I would just like to see things play out a little bit more in the crude oil market.
Well, to me, one of the reasons why I'm a bit cautious when it comes to crude oil here is the prospect of an economic slowdown. Again, we're not doom and gloomers here. I don't think it's going to be a great recession, great depression. I think, if we see stocks come down 15-25%, I wouldn't be surprised if energy, at least didn't rally in that environment. If you're getting a slowdown in economic demand or slowdown in growth, that's not really the best market for energy to continue higher. That being said, this low that we had here in June was definitely a higher low compared to the December low. But for me, what I'm watching here in terms of confirming or reinforcing the longer term bull trend is, can we take out these highs from April? If not, then I think it's going to stay in a choppy market. So let's go ahead and jump over we'll start with gold. So gold, big day here. I'm actually going to look at GLD real quick so viewers can see the magnitude of the pop that we had in both gold and silver today. So talk us through your analysis here on precious metals. Like I said, you had the webinar on Sunday. We're 3 days after that. Was your strategy bullish or bearish? You don't have to give me the details of the trade itself, but what was your approach coming into the precious metals market coming into this week?
Actually, gold, silver, and copper, we both, Ray and I agreed, we're looking like either the early stages of a primary cycle or a new primary cycle. And we liked all three of those markets and do like all three of those markets from the long side. Very interesting movement today in all three of those markets. One note both Ray and I had touched upon independently during the webinar was the fact that, we're definitely later in this cycle. And that tends to favor larger percentage movements in silver. And we certainly saw that today. I think silver's percentage move was that, albeit about double that of gold today. When I was asked, by one of our participants in the webinar, how I would have weighted some of these markets that we did review on Sunday. And I told them I did like, that I considered gold and silver to be kind of a duplicate trade. So I told people, when you're distributing your equity and deciding how much you're going to put into these trades, kind of look at gold and silver as one trade.
Right.
And when I was forced to make a decision between the two, I said I would be favoring silver over gold, and that felt out nice. It was a nice start to this trade. Some of the and in the webinar, we get very detailed trade suggestions, actual options, the expiration months, the strikes, the strategies. And in silver, both of those trades are up over 50% already in 3 days, which is a very nice start.
Great. Yeah, that is. I mean, you really can't ask for much more than that in a commodities market. I'm going to jump over to copper real quick. Copper also had a nice day, and it's not reflected here on the futures price, but like you said, it's just a similar story. It seems to be almost like an inflationary move. But what's interesting about that, Derek, is that you saw bonds bid, crude oil kind of taper off, today. So to me, it seems like the market's still trying to figure it out. Obviously, that there's an election this year. There's questions as to whether the Fed's actually going to cut and join other major central banks around the world. But I think the fact that, we saw such a big move in metals today, even as the dollar remains as strong as it has been, even despite the rally in the euro today, I think it really sends a message that there is global demand for precious metals in this macroeconomic environment, and it to me is more of like a safe haven trade of the sort for political and monetary uncertainties that are probably mounting into year end, and not to mention we have that first of 3 Jupiter square Saturn signatures. We enter that central time band next month. So any other comments on copper or the macro that you think viewers should know about?
Yeah, you had made a comment about crude oil and alluding to supply demand, and you're right. I mean, if we get into a weaker environment here, that certainly doesn't bode well for the demand side of copper or oil.
Yeah.
But then again, if we're looking at a sell-off of 16 to 26%, you have to think maybe it's not going to be a slowdown that's going to cause that. It could be maybe a geopolitical event. So in terms of crude, if there's some kind of supply disruption,
Right.
lack of supply can overcompensate for slower demand shorter term. And I kind of see that in copper too. Very interesting that I happen to be living in Panama now, whereas and I made note of this on Sunday. Very coincidentally, I'm not saying this is the reason, but there's a large copper mine here owned by Quantum. And in October, we had national protests for 5 to 6 weeks. And they'd shut down, main streets and all that, and they were nonstop, 24/7. And that kind of coincided with a bottom in copper. Copper was back around 350, I think, back then. The protests were successful in shutting down the copper mine here in Panama, which I believe is about 1.6% of the world's copper supply. In a tight market, that's pretty significant. So this mine is shut down now. The second reversal came in the stock market up over $5. And that kind of coincided with another event here in Panama, and that was the national election. New presidential election held, and the winner of that election is rumored to be pro-mine, to possibly reopening the mine. And a few days after the election, the market headed south again, and we've sold off, 80 cents a pound, pretty significant. Well, here we are one more time. There's an event in this chain, and that was yesterday was the inauguration of Panama's new president. So, maybe something occurs now that supports our view that we're in a new primary cycle in copper, and prices could head higher.
Very good. Well, Derek, thanks again for sharing your insights with us today. For viewers, if you want to learn more about what Derek and Ray did, the webinar is still up for sale at mmacycles.com. Derek, we do quarterly webinars. You and Ray do these quarterly webinars, correct?
Yeah, we do. And it wasn't a coincidence that, Ray and I picked the date of the webinar now. It was time to be right at this CRD.
Yeah.
So far, it's proven to be very timely. We'll be doing another webinar in the fall, selected to reflect, be in another CRD period. It's nice to have very specific recommendations. Whether you're a veteran trader or you're a new trader, they can certainly, make things easier. And we put a lot of insight into these trades. It's almost like getting two analysis for the price of one. That being said, these webinars are for options. So although we do analyze the markets, we give very specific option trade recommendations. So these are all, delta positive, and the important part of that is, they're all limited risk trades. We don't have any short option trades where you could have unlimited risk. So it's really set for, risk management and control. If people also need to get a little background in options, I know options can be they can be confusing, especially if you're a newer trader. We did a option webinar on, education of introduction to options. And I think that's still available on MMA. It's probably at a very good price. And, it's a few hours of really, easily and elementary explanations of options and the Greeks and the important things you need to know if you're going to be an option trader.
Very good. Well, thanks again for that. In terms of announcements, we do have that recording available online, as I mentioned, and then in a couple of weeks, we will have the monthly cycles report. Month of July is set to be released. And then, of course, the big MMA event of the year, the Lake Bled Investment Retreat in Slovenia, September 19th through the 22nd. Spots are limited. They're filling up, but we did have to contact a couple other hotels, actually, to get more rooms because there's been such a great sign-up rate for this event. We're really looking forward to it. So, Derek, are you going to be there? Even decided yet?
I do have a reservation right now.
Great.
I am planning to go, and I'm hoping that all works out. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody there in person, and it's supposed to be a gorgeous area. So
Indeed.
Could be really fun.
So it won't just be Derek. We'll have other MMA analysts there as well. Puyan, Wyatt, Matthew Kaiser, Ulrich. So if you want to meet the MMA team of analysts, that is the best place to do so. And that's all for now, everyone. Derek, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you all same time, same place next week.
Yanni, thank you very much.